Scientology could be called, well, you could call it a religion of religions.
Howdy everybody, and welcome to the Indie Scientology podcast, the show that is all about Scientology, the world's most interesting and controversial religion. I'm your host Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy, and today's guest interview is with Nathan Lord. Nathan is a former Sea Org member who worked at the Flag Service Org. He is from Melbourne, Australia, which is where I am from, just in case you didn't know. And this is out topic, but Melbourne is considered the world's most livable city. Kind of interesting, hey? So, we are both from the world's most livable city. But anyway, I don't know much about Nathan, but I'm sure we will all find out a lot more about him during this interview. So if you're ready, let's go down the Scientology rabbit hole where up is down and down is up, where what you thought was impossible is possible. So bust out a cup of tea and let's dig into this. Nathan, are you there?
I'm here.
Yeah, great. Good, do you like the intro?
Yeah, that was a great little world's most livable city, as they call it.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that it doesn't get mentioned much, but it's a little bit like, it's interesting to live in the world's most livable city, you know?
Yeah, especially with it being like I'm sitting in the west and you're sitting in the east, so I think we have two differing views of the world's livable city, huh?
Yeah, and like, I mean, I haven't done a huge amount of traveling, but I don't think it's that amazing, to be honest. But I guess they look at all the statistics like jobs and parking and traffic, and then they calculate and they go, Melbourne's the world's most livable city.
Yeah, really, I'm in the same boat. I've sort of like, I don't really know how the classification. I've lived in numerous places, obviously in Clearwater, Florida as well. So,
well, what was Clearwater like compared to Melbourne?
That's like, yeah, that's an amazing question. America is not what Australians are portrayed.
So like, what does that mean?
I think
is like, because what we sort of see it as being like glitzy and gangstery or something because of the movies or something. Or?
Well, one of the biggest things that I got when I got there was like I had no understanding of what I was getting into when I was recruited. Absolutely none. And
how fast did you get recruited into the Sea Org? It was pretty fast, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was picked up. I was introduced to Scientology and at Flag within a month.
Yeah, it's pretty epic. That is pretty. I mean, hold on. Just quickly finish describing Clearwater as a town compared to Melbourne. Then we'll go into the whole Flag stuff.
So Melbourne's a very metropolitan place. It's very. There's a lot of cafes, a lot of bars, a lot of things to do. Clearwater is a very, it's like a beach resort sort of town. There's not that much that happens around it, but it's a pathway to the rest of Florida. It's meant to have some of the world's best beaches in Clearwater, and look, seeing much of it as a Scientologist, you don't get to see much. Through my role as a purchaser, I got to see like the malls, the businesses, and all that sort of stuff. And it's amazingly different. You can't really. I don't know how to explain it any better than that. It's just.
Is it kind of like what's it called, the Gold Coast in Australia?
If the Gold Coast, probably the Gold Coast of about 50 years ago.
Oh, okay, so without all the heaps of apartment buildings just everywhere and built up.
With the church owning a lot of downtown Clearwater, it's sort of
okay.
Like, it's hardly there.
I could imagine that.
You drive around the corners and the church has got beautiful buildings. Like it invests, it drops a lot of money into them, but like there's no people, there's no environment, there's no there was nothing for general people to do. And then they go down the beach and you drive across the causeway and you're on a beach, or you drive the other way, you go to Tampa. Tampa's a lot nicer than Clearwater, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, it seems like there is a lot of stuff to do in Melbourne. Like apparently, and this is another statistic that's really interesting, Melbourne has the highest amount of live music performances in the world. Again, another thing where it's like, wow, so it is a pretty happening place. Like in this part of the world, it is pretty happening.
No, and definitely coming back to a place like Melbourne has been getting like back to what I knew and being around people, and that's really been good for my recovery from the church. But Clearwater does have that. There's a Clearwater Festival they used to play music across the road down in one of the parks. But again, it's sort of like Melbourne is one of those cities where you can go out and get a cup of coffee and not be threatened by anything.
Yeah,
it's one of the places
pretty
where
safe.
you can go out into the malls around and you're not dealing with it. But again, a lot of things has changed since I was a kid. A lot of the malls are starting to stay open, but a lot of it I see is a changes towards the American style. Strip malls, which are like you drive by every 6 meters in America, basically, and they're starting to pop up more and more in Australia. So I think a lot of things are changing towards America as well. But again, Melbourne being so large, I think it bypass a lot of the different structures that that happened in Clearwater. Like Clearwater doesn't have anything. It's not, the live music's not there. The cafes, there's like one bar now in Clearwater. There's no pubs. There's no live music. There's no there's some parks, but there's no one sitting in the park. Like you go down in the park in Melbourne and you'll see people reading books under the tree, playing chess, everything. Like in Clearwater, that's just dead.
Well, that's what's really interesting because Aaron Smith-Levin, right?
Yep.
He will mention. I remember he mentioned stuff like Clearwater is the Scientology town. It should be, affluent and booming. Yet downtown Clearwater is like a ghost town or something. And he would, I guess he would be knocking the Church of Scientology, saying it's like, they're not having an effect or they're having a negative effect. And my question is like, well, hold on a second. What if that's just normal for an American town to be like that? Like, I don't like.
It's 100% not.
So Clearwater's unusual compared to the other towns in Florida.
Clearwater's unusual for a lot of different reasons, but what I remember from being and getting around a little bit is that like you leave Clearwater and you see a completely different aspect of the city, of the country. Anywhere you travel, there's people downtown. It's like Florida is one of the biggest. Has one of the largest increases in people every year, and it's not just the elderly; it's young people also coming into Florida.
The good weather. People like the warm weather.
Yeah, they like the weather, but there's also the opportunity and the boom that's coming from Florida. But Clearwater itself is like the churches. I've got to agree with what
Aaron.
Your statement is. Clearwater's being controlled by the church.
Really, and it's keeping it quiet.
It's amazingly quiet, right? I think the Starbucks only exists because staff members buy coffee.
But hold on a second though. This is my understanding. I haven't been there, but okay. There's a section where I imagine all the church buildings are. So what about the other section of downtown? Like, wouldn't that just be like any other downtown, or?
No, mate. There's no other section of downtown.
So the church is just taking it over. So it's just there's too many Scientologists there, and they're just busy studying courses and not hanging out.
Well, that's obviously one of the party lines that they want you to believe, but I would doubt that there's the increase in expansion or the amount of people on course is also actually true. But there's something like 37 to 40 different buildings that the church owns in Clearwater,
and then they're just sort of empty, not really doing much, are they?
Well, they're in some respects, like there's a lot of they've got the whole adult trainee program, which they'll help boom the stats but for graduation, like 3/4 of it is adult trainees or staff. It's sort of like there's only a small portion of it that's actually public. But then you've got them all around. But with 40 buildings in downtown Clearwater, you take the Fort Harrison Boulevard, or whatever it's called now, and you can almost draw a line and say this section here is just all church. Like it's an amazing amount of buildings.
Well, if these buildings, the way, like, if the flag is similar to like all the other ideologues, or most of them, where it's just a quiet big building, that means that there's just heaps of quiet big buildings around downtown. So no wonder why it's a ghost town.
Yeah, but there's the one thing that you got to get with flag is that they'll never let flag falter. They will always push flag. They'll always bring in new trainees. They'll always make people come in for training.
Yeah, so you're saying that they're actually filling these buildings up?
No, I'm saying that there's 1,200 to 1,500 staff members, but.
Oh, okay, so they're full of staff members, yeah.
And that's just the normal. That was when I was there. It left with about there was the CMO, there was RTC interventions, there was flag crew and FSO. There's about 1,500 staff in total. That's not including out-org trainees and public. Public were almost non-existent, but out-org trainees they push them from every building, and it's the ideal scene. Go to get flag trained is the current is the push.
Well, when I was involved with the church, the first few years there was this sort of push to get people to flag to get trained for the ideal org, and then the next 3 years there was this push to get people to flag because of GAT2. So I imagine that just every 5 years there's some new little thing to just push a flood of people up, like staff members around the world, to flag.
Yeah, when I left, and I left about 10 years ago, they were pushing heavily on the basics and filling 6 course rooms. Now, flag's meant to be the top of the org board. Why are they pushing a Div 6 course room? It was just everything is a push. Everything is related to a money grab. It's amazing how much effort and upper intervention there is, and it's especially felt hard at flag because flag has the public that can be sold to in bigger numbers. So the quotas become bigger for flag.
So when they released the Golden Age of Knowledge, the revamp of all the books, they also were getting all these staff members to go to flag to train on just the books. Like that's pretty rare.
They were also getting So let me rephrase this. I'm under the belief that all staff that were on site were training on the books.
Because it was just a requirement. They were like, this is what they say. We fix up the books, we fix up the editing mistakes, so everyone has to restudy them. And instead of doing them at your local org, come all the way up to flag. I don't really get why they go to flag for that. You can just do it. You can do it at home.
Mate, that's the push. Everyone's trying to make their quota. Everyone's trying to make the percentage of sales. Everyone's trying to they're ripping each other's public. And there was a Div 6 course room in that flag in the Coachman building, and they were trying to fill it up because that's what they had. It's the line was orders of magnitude. So it was staff believed that there's enough people out there to fill every course room. So of course flag would then participate in it. The problem is that there's probably not as many people as what they thought. So they're just ripping it from each other.
Yeah, this little internal fighting.
It's all like
cannibalizing public and staff. And
Melbourne, you would have said just even the push for a public like yourself to go to flag is incredible, and they would have taken your money. No problems at all, but you would have been sitting there at the end of it going, well, now I have to get to flag and then I have to pay for accommodation, and that's not what they sell you. They sell you service.
So with, because I'm pretty sure recently the intel on the whole new Mecca building is that it is quiet, like these ideal org things. So to me, that would explain why downtown Clearwater is a ghost town, because the whole of the Church of Scientology, except apparently Taiwan and Russia, it's quiet.
Yeah, and that's also what I'm hearing as well. But again, the Mecca building is a city block. It's it's an enormous building. So they were already They probably didn't have enough public when they were in the Fort Harrison Hotel, but then they were also there was a building called the Coachman that was doing service delivery. They had out-org trainees. They have the AO. So I think they've just tried to money grab or grab just landmarks and different buildings. And there's even a parking structure just behind the Mecca building, which is probably empty of all cars. They're probably going to start putting a toll booth on it and selling the cars to someone else, you know what I mean? Or get staff to put their cars there. It's sort of it's an amazing...
Well, that's interesting because I think that they rent out I think they're movie studios to people who want to use it. So it's just really funny seeing it become like a business, like as in, yeah, we'll rent out our church car park and we'll rent out our movie studios, and it's just like, oh, that's a clever way to cover up the fact you aren't selling any courses. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
or the funniest thing is staff rarely get to travel in their own cars, right? And the cars were trapped out in the berthing, like the Hacienda Gardens and all that sort of stuff. But they probably moved every single car from the Hacienda Gardens and parked it in the parking structure so it looks like there's people. That's a trick that they probably have done.
Done for a special event or a photo shoot, or just in general, they would want you to. They want to do it to be a regular thing so people can see flag is always looking like it's full.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things that during my time there, flag needed to be seen as the epitome or the top of the services, but also with regards to local events, it was like they needed to be seen as the best thing that happened to Clearwater. There was a lot of antagonism, but you can see that when they've hired the police force to actually be the security guards, they want to make sure that they're protected in the city itself.
It's interesting. I remember when the Melbourne opened up its ideal.org, one of the first things I noticed was that I assumed, especially because they were moving out of the city and they were to an inner suburb, I assumed that the parking would be like fantastic. It would just be like, yeah, you just go in there like the parking at, I don't know, other things in the suburbs. You go in there and you get a parking spot. But they did have parking on the ideal.org block, but it just wasn't a very big car park at all. And around it, you can park for a bit, but there's some parking restrictions and stuff. So basically, right, even though this ideal.org wasn't full at all, like they would have, heaps of empty seats in their fancy PE course rooms and stuff, and there was heaps of empty auditing rooms that weren't been getting used, yet the car park facility and all that sort of stuff was full. So people would drive past, and I heard someone who wasn't a Scientologist just mention this on some radio show or something. He said how he goes, I've passed the church heaps, and the car park looks full always and stuff. So it actually does have that effect to make it look like it's happening and it's full, yet it's just mainly a lot of staff that are parked in that car park.
And that's probably what I would say they would be doing down in Clearwater, Florida. I know that when I was there, it was staff weren't allowed to walk between buildings and that sort of thing.
Why not?
Needed to take, because it was seen as it was, one, you weren't productive. Two, it was seen as out PR, because now you're walking down the streets in uniform and you're not being seen as that you're making yourself visible in some ways. But yeah, staff were constantly abashed for walking between buildings. The other thing with staff walking between buildings is that they generally do it all at the same time. Like you have half an hour for lunch, so you walk to go and get yourself something to eat from the mess.
So they want the staff to only walk between the buildings in groups, like primary school kids or something.
Staff to walk between buildings in groups.
Oh, they just don't want it at all.
30 to 40 people trying to cross the street all at one time.
Who cares? How's that out PR? I mean, like, come on, there's got to be more. They had to have had a better excuse for that.
Seriously, there wasn't. There was like, they didn't want to block traffic. They didn't want to block the sidewalks.
Oh, they didn't want to annoy the local council or something like that.
Yeah, possibly. Or the local residents by having everyone walk and block their areas or something. But yeah, you weren't allowed to walk between buildings. You had to catch a bus or you had to catch a van.
No way.
100%. 100%.
That just makes so much dev tea.
Well, that's one word for it, but you had to wait for, like, multiple times. You'd be sitting there with something to rush to do, and you walk up to a van and it's all full. Or you have to catch a bus that goes around a circuit to get you to the Fort Harrison Hotel, which is the last stop because you're at the first stop. Like you had to be on a certain bus to go to the AO, or a certain van that could only run to the AO because they had their structures and they had their routes already planned out. it was amazing. And so like, and I know that they've changed because of the new buildings. I know that they've pushed in a different place for buses to park. So now that they've got a fallback, should anyone be protesting in any other area.
I mean, Scientology is just an amazing enigma, because you'll never see so many staff members, whether it's Sea Org or local churches, moving around, doing so much movement and achieving so little, while at the same time, they are kind of smart. And if you actually let them go and become bakers or like window cleaners or something, you'll probably see that they actually like clean windows like well and stuff, and like efficiently and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, as in that, like they'll run around and do ridiculous shit while at the church, because they've been told to follow all these orders and stuff. Yet in their own life, they can have like a great pressure cleaning business that's actually kind of efficient.
Well, the thing is that the lines that the church uses is that in the WOG world, you could be anything. You could be, if you apply these processes, you could be anything that you want. A major business leader in regards to opening your own businesses. You could earn millions, but you've dedicated your life to the org. But if you leave, you should only work at Macca's. I'm not speaking ill to anyone who works at Macca's, but
yeah, I know. That's another enigma that I'm talking about. Like, there's so many like little things that are like, that's why up is down and down is up, because it's just like, what the hell?
But they use the lines, like they have one person who, like, out of like 100 who will like end up on Skid Row in some respects, and they're the ones they tell you about. They're not going to tell you about like
the successes.
The success stories, like guys that we're connected to now who are like owning their own businesses, like they will never talk about those. They'll never talk about the people who can, unless they come back. That's the greatest thing. Like if someone comes back into the church's structure now, it's like, oh, they did so well because they pulled their ethics in and they reconnected to Scientology. No, they left Scientology and they got their shit together and then
they came back. Yeah, and them leaving enabled them to have freedom to get their shit together.
Yeah, and that's really like, because that's one of the biggest things I saw is that there's so much pressure.
Yeah, there's pressure.
Like the only way to rebel in that pressure is to go out ethics.
Yeah, you literally just have to say like, I'm disconnecting basically. You have to just totally disconnect.
And that's one of the things. Like, it's taken me almost 10 years to get to a point where I can actually talk openly that I was involved in the church. And so, like, I was scared for the longest time until I started seeing the other people who had come out. But like you always believe that you're going to be attacked if you speak up against Scientology, because that's the stories they tell you, and they actually gloat in the church about the people who they attack, except when they're high execs who have decided to blow.
They never mention them. Yeah. There are some people who they suddenly have just disappeared, and you never know about it. It's like the book 1984, where like Winston in that book, who'll mention like something like, who'll be like, someone's just gone, and you never hear from them again, and no one knows the person's just gone. Anyway, I want to say something. I remember when it's funny because there was this staff member that was, I think, trying to reg me for staff at Melbourne Org, and this staff member was a bit antago, and she had that Sea Org attitude. You know, she wasn't a Sea Org person, but she had this brutal attitude that Sea Org members have. I don't know how she got it, but I think she was just anger tone naturally. But she had this brutal attitude, and so she would say something like, come join us, what are you going to do, clean gutters for the rest of your life, and pick on you and shit. Then while at the same time it's like, hold on a second, but I'll do my bridge and I'll achieve like greatness and all this sort of stuff. And so it's just like, it's just funny how like they just pick and choose which data they want to tell you and stuff.
And that's really the biggest problem that you have, that anyone will have with the church, is that they seem to have the answer for every problem that you're making for yourself. Like, you're 100% right. Though the woman would have been classified as being tone 40 as well, like pushing through barriers. That's what they were told.
But also they're doing it in this weird antago way that isn't tone 40.
Yeah, which is completely not what the definition is, but they promote that this is the way forward, and they promote that the only way to go clear is up the bridge, but then on staff, but then auditing someone else, but then so there's all these different things, and they will use at every different portion of the conversation. It's amazing what they try and do to influence the person.
Yeah.
And it is. So like Antago,
and it works.
Yeah, but because this is the biggest one that gets me is the church constantly talks about communication is the universal solvent. Well, there's obviously different issues on this subject right now, but if it's the universal solvent, why the hell haven't they chosen to talk to anyone? Why are they not talking to Leah Remini? Why are they not talking to any single person who's being a critic of the church? They've completely shut down. It's like, why don't you talk to an SP, or why don't you talk to a blown staff member? And if it's the universal solvent, you can obviously solve it.
I know. Well, when I left the Melbourne church, I mean, I had, I think, one person. What happened was, I think HCO contacted a bunch of people on Facebook and said, defriend from Andy. If you want to find out, contact the details, contact HCO. And I had a friend contact me. I wasn't close with that many people, but one close friend contacted me and said, "Hey, I've got this message from HCO. What's up?" And he actually asked me and communicated with me, which is a normal reaction. He was like the only one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the rest, you just don't hear anything from. It's just like they all just go quiet and that's it.
I'm like, just as a point, like I was a staff member.
Sorry. He maybe one other person.
Yeah,
maybe.
I was a staff member for years. I've got friends. I've got ex-wives. I've got one, but I've got friends. I've had people that I left. Look, if they're still involved in the church currently, they don't even speak to me.
Yeah.
Like, I contacted several of them, and they go, "Have you handled this thing with the church yet?" I said, "Funny you say that. No." And literally, like the next second, I'm defriended and blocked and everything else.
Yeah, I just don't like how they don't like when I first initially left, and it wasn't like Andy's this big bad guy. I don't get how they just didn't say like a message or a call and say, "Hey Andy, what's up? What's going on?" It's just like as soon as they hear that there's something not quite right with the person, they go, "That's HCO territory, and I'm not going anywhere near that HCO. That person needs to see HCO, and that's it."
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing because this is this is the thing with the church, and this is why it's amusing. Is every single person who blows is then HCO territory, or everyone who leaves is HCO territory, and every time they become HCO territory, they don't know if you're going to go further. And it's like, I think more SPs out there than there are staff members, but they don't know if you're going to go and start attacking backwards. And automatically, no matter what happens to a person, no matter what reason they leave for, they've already seen as attacking it because they decided to leave. Yeah. So therefore, already fair game.
Yeah, even if they wanted to leave to start like a guitar career or something, which required a lot of time, and there was a little bit of an ARC break, but no, they're HCO territory now, so they just
avoid. Look, I've listened to a lot of stuff to try and help me in my recovery after the church, and the biggest thing, if you're using the church's like information, sometimes it's not correct. But like, if you think about what an ARC break is and how that could affect a blow, like you're dealing with a subject matter that could quite honestly handle so many different things. If you told staff members that that people like leave because of an ARC break rather than missed withholds, you're not going to miss a withhold. That in itself is missing a withhold, right? The reason that you want to blow is because you're missing a withhold. Therefore, you're missing a withhold because you want to blow. Therefore, you're missing a withhold.
Okay. So you're saying you want to leave, right? So that becomes your withhold.
Yep. So
then you go miss withholding and you leave.
But you can't tell anyone about it because because that's illegal. So you want to leave, so that's a withhold. You can't tell anyone, so that's what you're withholding some information from people. Then you have to go tell HCO. So automatically you're in ethics trouble. If you're in ethics trouble, you get your privileges taken away. So you don't want to have that. So you sit there with the information that you want to blow, unless you get to go into session, if you're lucky, and the auditor doesn't want to write a KR on you. Because auditors also write KRs and stuff on their PCs. It's not like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, I didn't like that.
Dude, there's so many things that I didn't like in the end, but yeah, it's just it's normal. It's sort of like they think it's okay to take the privilege of me speaking to someone and say, no, you know what, we don't think that was good for your recovery, so therefore we're going to make a KR about it. Why? Like, why does someone need to know what I've just told you under the e-meter?
I had problems with that because I knew that everything that was coming up, like overt-wise, I would then have to do a cycle on HCO and have big debates about and interpretations of the tech, and then I would be like, oh my God. And so it's just as kind of like when you're drilling with someone, you can drill with someone who's smart and who's uptone, and you can pass the drill fine, but if you're dealing with someone you don't get along well with or whatever, or who's low-toned and not that smart, you can just be like, oh my God, now this drill is going to be annoying. So it depends on what terminal you get in HCO. You know what I mean? And you're like, oh no, I'm going to have to go handle all this stuff in HCO. What if I have this person who's going to be problematic? And you're like, oh no.
Mate, the difference between the public and being on staff, and from the staff point of view, it's sort of like you have to make so many things go right to get your hands on an auditor to actually even go up the bridge as a staff member, because you're treated as a second, third-class citizen.
Yeah.
And you make so many things go right, and then when you're sitting in the middle of it, you know that you're going to get that there's so many things that you need to handle before you can handle your case, but you're not allowed to. So as soon as you start, you're already in an ethics problem. So where you're going to have to go to HCO and get handled to go back and be paid to go back on your course, we're going to have to find out what's wrong with us, then go and handle that before the auditor will allow us to go back in. And
so you're just filled up with PTPs? Well,
always, as a staff member. I think it's PTP Central as a staff member.
Interesting. I got a question about the Fort Harrison. Before they moved to the Mecca, were they doing like heaps of stuff at the Fort Harrison, and then the upper levels of the building was hotel rooms?
Yes. So
yeah.
What I remember of the Fort Harrison Hotel is that the upper levels were accommodation. Then there was a section of the hotel rooms which were auditing rooms, different HGCs. I think there was 4 HGCs in there, and then there was the ballroom and different rooms inside the Fort Harrison that they could use for events. And I think there was also a room on the top of the Fort Harrison that was also used for events. So a smaller ballroom type, mezzanine, ballroom type area. But yeah, the Fort Harrison Hotel was everything for the church. It was the first building they moved into. It underwent so many different renovation actions. Security was housed out of it. The staff auditing rooms are in the basement.
So what do you think now? Do you think now it's just all a hotel?
From what I remember, what the plan was to convert it all back into a hotel. To put about 4 different restaurants into it, make it a hotel.
Hold on a second. What's the deal with 4 different restaurants within just one hotel?
Money, mate.
So what? Like a fancy restaurant on the top level looking out, and a fancy restaurant near the pool, and then one for just a general dining room.
When I was there was a restaurant that was sitting in the mezzanine. There was a canteen sitting on the floor. There was a brunch sort of room, cafe sort of area sitting to the other side, and I think they would put on special dinners in the top.
Are these restaurants actually pulling a profit like businesses? Basically, are they really doing that?
Look, I can't speak. I was FSO during my time, and flag crew was the one who controls those, and I wasn't really over over that.
So
But
yeah.
I know that for based on the church's stat management, they would have attempted to make a profit.
Yeah, I'm
And
sure. Because
you
the GI's like gone down in that, and the ideologues haven't been a success. So I mean, they've got to get GI from somewhere.
Well, and that's the thing is the GI for like again, GI is a very questionable, in some ways a questionable stat. GI is gross income in for anyone who's listening, and gross income is how much you can reg a person for. But if you think about what GI is though like you yourself could be regged for $1,000, which is going to add to services undelivered. Now, what? So GI is a very one-way flow. So like you're not delivering a service for that 1,000. You're promising to deliver a service for that $1,000. But that's and in some respects there's that. But then that's the biggest thing with the IAS. The IAS is now you're not paying for a service. You're just giving money. So a lot of it when I was changing was changing towards just IAS donations, because IAS donations doesn't mean you have to deliver any service. You also get a commission for that. So they're probably going to be pushing more on the commissions for your GI rather than actually getting money for services.
Mm. So, but if the restaurants were making money, it'll be in Div 2, Div 3, I think they would classify it under some other form of revenue, like the same as if they made money off renting out a hall or something, and it would help.
Well, no. If for as it was Flag Crew, to my belief, because Flag Crew was its delivery organization wasn't services as Scientology services. It was goods and services around the hotel and the properties. So
under their GI definition, it was that as well.
Well, so I guess I think the thing that needs to be brought up here is that Flag has a number of different organizations. Flag had Crew, which was the estates org. So
they had what? Sorry, did it cut out?
Crew.
They had what?
Flag Crew.
Flag Crew. Okay.
Yeah. So that was the estates org. They would do cleaning, house cleaning. They would do food. They would do accommodation. They controlled that. So the concierge at Flag was a Flag Crew staff member.
Mm.
You also had FSO, which was the Flag Service Organization, which was had a different GI, different set of stats, and they were responsible for the delivery of the services of Scientology. Before I left, they brought in Flag FLB, which was a management organization to sit on top of Flag only to manage the different services of Flag and to make sure that the services were being delivered. Then you also had CMO, you had a gold office, you had RTC, you had all these, and you had a bridge liaison office. So you had all these offices acting with their own set of stats as well. So my stat was, as FSO, our stat was gross income for services, for Scientology delivery, for auditing hours, for courses and training. Flag Crew was responsible for, and its GI was made up of what it sold for its restaurants, what it made for its accommodation, what it's like the selling of the services to admiral trainees, that sort of level.
Do you have an idea of what the GI was on average every week?
FSO was over 2 million.
Okay, so that's not including the food stuff or anything. What do you think? Oh, so you don't know, but what do you think it was combining everything?
Look, combining everything is a very, I would say,
basically the revenue of Flag. What's the revenue of Flag? And this was you're talking about 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, about 10 years ago.
So about 2 million a week. That's pretty big for services.
It's amazing for services. And that was just the registrars, mate.
That was just consistently. It was that.
Sorry?
That was consistently week by week, something like that.
because they were managed for the stats to be up. So it was over 2 million a week.
And at the same time, there were people regging for IAS as
Yep.
well, and IAS is a separate thing.
Yep.
Wow, so it's a good money maker.
Oh mate, if you think how many people if you have 1,500 staff members working for $50 a week, and every single cent you're getting in is basically like cream on top, it's sort of like that cream becomes a lot of money. And like we were operating on a budget probably of around a third of that, not even a third of that, like not even a quarter. We were probably operating on a couple of $100,000.
Oh, is that because they feed you with really cheap food and stuff? And
well, like crew was responsible for that, but like we were responsible for like some of the things that were coming out of our budget at that time was the investigative services for that were tracking DM's dad. That was probably being paid for by Flag. There was the Source magazine. Like every week, every month that went out was about $100,000 in postage and printing costs. Because you're dealing with 90,000 magazines in high gloss.
Yeah.
So and then there was that sort of like promo was a large portion of that. Income was payroll was a smaller portion. Like it was at maximum ever that I remember it being was probably $75,000 for a week.
Which would be how much for you in your pocket?
Oh, that was a good week for us.
Like what'd you get
for those weeks?
What'd you get?
Probably about $100.
So the best week you ever had was about 100.
Yeah. But a Flag also tries to pay a lot of bonuses to staff who are productive in regards to GI. Like the registrars pull out really nice figures. One of the stories that I have in my catalogue is the first ever, I think it was $5 million IAS reg. So amazing reg. The registrar, there was two of them. They closed this guy for $5 million in one sum. The next day we put there was an order from INT that said that every single staff member was to be rewarded with dinner on amazing breakfast, and then out to Busch Gardens, which is like a theme park. And then they could go to the movies and we would pay for their dinner. I spent about $150,000 on a credit card around different various places in Tampa to help facilitate this. Like it was so rewarding. Money coming in is always rewarded, and I think it will still be that way. Like if you can make a lot of money, you're safe in Scientology.
When I was involved with Melbourne Org, maybe they were getting on average 15 or 20 grand GIs. But, I mean, with the big ideal org and that sort of stuff, I mean, the bills were a fair bit, really. I mean, they weren't making much money at all. So with Flag, like bills to, how much profit? Do you reckon they're making really good profit, or they're just not making that much?
The thing is with Science, like, I guess it's like the P&L obviously would be something else, but Flag owns its buildings.
So they're not paying some higher org or anything?
No, everyone's paying a higher org, but Flag is sending money up to INT per the Flag per the policies. So we're probably spending close to like a fifth of the amount of money that they made, and so 4/5 were being sent up lines.
Wow.
So if you're over 2 million, you're probably sending close to $1.6 million a week up to INT.
And the 400,000 in this example you're talking about, that's staff paying for the Source mag, paying for things like that?
Yeah, paying for promo, paying for staff's wages, paying for clothing, paying for even Flag has to pay for the gold recert. So e-meters which need certification from gold, we have to pay. So nothing's free in Scientology.
So basically, when I was involved with the Melbourne church, because I didn't really know the breakdown of where the money was going, let's say they make a GI of 20 grand and they're just paying the bills, that's basically because so much of it, you reckon, is going to higher orgs. Is that what you think?
Well, there would be outer org trainees from Melbourne org who are at the AO in Sydney.
Yeah.
And there'd be outer org trainees at Flag.
Yeah.
Now, their services are not free.
Yeah.
So at some point they would need to be paying for those bills. The AO would also be trying to supplement as best it can, or the org would be trying to supplement as best it can to pay people to try and get some clothing parts so that they're not completely disheveled.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff isn't cheap because you're not buying in bulk. But then there are also just the admin supplies. Just imagine the ream of paper costs.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Like we were buying 40 cases of paper a week.
But you're saying at Flag though, at Flag you're saying that heaps of the money was leaving Flag and going higher up.
Yeah.
So do you reckon in Melbourne the same thing? Just heaps of the money is leaving Melbourne and going higher up. It's not like they're just paying 20% to higher up. Most of it. So basically, the reason why they couldn't really afford new T-shirts and stuff is because of all this money going up lines.
Look, that's open to debate, and obviously there's policy letters written that would say that most of that money should go up lines.
Yeah.
It becomes hidden.
So it basically forces Flag and it forces ideal orgs. They have to have massive affluent weeks every time in order for it to be reasonable for the staff. It basically says you better be upstat, you better be having a hardcore week successfully, otherwise, you're going to be eating crappy food, not have good uniforms.
Yeah, and that's basically Flag was like in my time in Flag. If they had a booming week where it was a possibility for a bonus to be paid, if you weren't upstat, you didn't get paid the bonus. So if the org was upstat and you were upstat, then you sometimes you got to share in that. If the org was downstat and you were upstat, you got to live. If you were downstat and the org was upstat, you were able to hide. But if the org was downstat and you were downstat, you were dead. You were ethics bait.
It makes sense, but it doesn't make sense because it's like, yeah, okay, if someone's not producing a lot, then obviously they shouldn't get paid a lot. But the problem is that because of all the rules and the way the church is strangling Scientology and shutting it down, right? Is that all right? Did it fall?
Yeah. No, that's good.
So because the church is strangling Scientology, they've sort of made it, like especially with their squirreling and stuff, they've made it so it's hard to ever get an affluence. You know what I mean? The whole thing is like you and all your staff members can't go, hey, let's boom our org, because it's just like the whole thing is in such a mess. Maybe you can do it for 1 or 2 weeks, but that's it. You can't do it permanently.
And that's one of the biggest things. So like one of the things that they've hidden from a lot of people in Scientology is actually the trending of a stat. Like they talk a lot on a weekly stat management, like is your stat in affluence, is your stat in normal, and stat management is a very key issue behind the church. But you can't find the historical data to prove what that stat's doing over time.
Hold on a second. So on your post, you couldn't find like the past 5 years or something, or 10 years?
Because you record it yourself, you could find your own stat.
But you couldn't. There's no history.
You can't go back and ask what the GI stat is for Flag.
Why not?
Because they're not going to tell it me.
Why not? Because it's out PR because they know that it's bad. Like it's not as good.
Yeah, it's amazingly bad. From people who remember the numbers and have actually tried to track the figures, it's like downtrending into like non-existence.
Yeah. So back in the late 70s, it was probably like 2 million a week, and now with money worth a totally different value, it's probably not even 2 million now. It's probably like 1 million a week.
The services are paid. You're paying more, but like even in the time, I think, and even in the last 10 years, I think the amount that they're actually being able to get out of people is been downtrending for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
I doubt you're going to get someone who's leaving the church to say that right now the church is earning over 2 million a week. 10 years ago that was the case, but now it's probably even lower.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I reckon it is.
So when you look at that figure, it's all like no one's going to show you the stat for 10 years of the church, a flat.
Yeah, now I get it. Now I get it. Because when I was involved with the church, I was like, why are they so interested in the stat for this week? Like, it's so obsessive about this week. And it's just like, now I get it, because it hides, they don't want to talk about long term because it hides. Like, if David Miscavige doesn't want people knowing the long term stats, because they'll all be able to see that David Miscavige is doing a terrible job of COB.
Well, again, it's sort of like, well, yeah, that's that. Anyone who actually looks can see that. But one of the things that I can't remember who posted it, but someone decided to post what the stats on like the birthday events and how the stat videos that David Miscavige is toting as the best ever, and there's no figures on them. There's no benchmark. There's no this is what the measurement is. This is one unit equals X amount. It's so like, of course it's best ever. It's because it's been made that way.
Yeah.
It's so what's best ever is like two people decided to join Scientology. Whoops, that's great because that's double what happened last week. But is that really the case?
It's fascinating, by the way, because you left, right? How long were you in there for? Like 10 years or something?
So I was in there I joined in 2007. I left in 2007 and I joined just after 9/11. So I was there for 6 years.
Oh, so you were sort of similar to me, and this is what's interesting, because it's people who have been there for more than 10 years that sort of makes me think, wow, they must be in a really interesting state of mind, because it's just like, how can you not see that the stats that each year, how can you? I mean, they must be thinking it and just ignore it, but each year they see these events with Dave Miscavige, and they must be thinking, that's not 4 times the stat. He says this every year. Like, it's really interesting. Or do they actually? Are they dumb enough to get tricked? Are they dumb enough to get tricked by it?
Well, mate, it's not. They're not.
Like I said, this is again when I talk about. Like, I know someone, for example, in Melbourne Org, who has a successful, I think it's pressure cleaning and window cleaning business, and I'm pretty sure he's making good money. He would kill it if anyway. Like, in one area he's so smart, then in the other area, when it comes to the Church of Scientology, it's just like everything that from the church must be true, and he must trust David Miscavige.
Well, and this is the indoctrination process, and this is like you can like the church. Some of the church members are the most intelligent people I have ever met.
Yeah.
But everyone has their blind spot, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes family, sometimes it's looking, but like there's a concept that I've learned subsequent to leaving the church, which is like sunken cost. And so, like, could you imagine investing 10 years of your life into something?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Then have to admit that it's wrong.
Yeah, you don't want to. Yeah, I know. Yeah. You don't want to. Yeah.
10 years in, like, let's just look and wait it out another 12 months. And like, I put 11 years in, let's just wait out another 12 months. I put in 12 years, let's just wait because it's going to get better. We're going to succeed. And like, they're constantly doing that. And it's really the people who have left. So like, it's the hardest thing to do. Like, if you imagine that your whole life, everything taken care for you for 10 years, like I left in 2007. I was 29 when I left, and I was in for 6 years. I spent a large portion of my adult life in the Church of Scientology.
Yeah.
Like, I'm living that, going, okay, I have no family. I only have my family. I have hardly any friends. I'm going to have to reestablish myself in a country which I don't really know anymore. It's a scary thing, but the way that I looked at it is, what's scarier? Is it scarier to stay in this system?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or leave.
Yeah.
And when you realize that the church promotes that you'll never do well without us, you always have to use us. We're the only people that will help this planet. And as soon as you realize that that's bullshit, excuse the French, maybe put a sound effect in there somewhere. As soon as you realize that that's not true, you can go, hang on a second, it's not scary on the outside. I am a Thetan. I am a capable being. I can control my own destiny. And as soon as you realize what Scientology is trying to say behind the scenes, you go, look, I'm out. Sorry, guys. I'm off this mad roller coaster. And you use the precepts against it.
Yeah. I think that when you see people who are smart, who are inside the church, they're smart. Well, they're smart outside the church, but when it comes to the church, they're dumb. It must be because they just turn off their critical thinking ability and they just say, no, I'm agreeing with anything this church says. David Miscavige says his stat's 4 times up this year, so that stat is 4 times up that year, and David Miscavige is doing the right thing. And they might even think, well, David Miscavige is lying about these stats, but he has to do it because the SPs are attacking the church, so we have to just pretend like the church is growing more to try and keep the church going. And that's how, and you know what I mean? They do doublethink or something like that.
Yeah, and that's a lot. But there's also like thought stopping processes. Like it's you say that it's a miswithhold, you're doing it, it's a thought stop. So you're having this thought that maybe it's not true, but then you think, oh, obviously I've committed an overt against someone or something. Like, so you stop that thought.
Yeah, there's all these mental gymnastics that go on with things that, like, you know what I mean?
And that's 100%. Like the thought stopping is definitely it definitely affects you. But look, you're so concerned about your daily living and if you're upstat for a week, and how are you going to get the next big thing so that your stats can the next week.
It distracts you.
Like because you're, as a Sea Org member, your sleep time, like no one really mentions sleep anymore, but my work shift was something like I would be up at 7:30 in the morning for exercise muster, and I wasn't allowed to I was not allowed to leave post to minimally 11:15. So if you look at how much time you're actually getting to sleep, it's like I was pulling 4 hours a night for 5 years. It's sort of like it's not uncalled for. So if you've got a sleep deprivation issue, you've got people trying to invest and trying to get their stats up, you've got food which can go really good or really bad in seconds. You could be put on ethics, and like I've had multiple meals where it was just beans and rice because I was in trouble. It's all like these are quick things that you can do, like until you produce and come back, and as soon as you make money, you're rewarded by, oh, here's fresh fruit, here's meat, here's everything that you desired. Here, go home early. You've earned it, like, because you made money. So you're reinforcing the positive, like a Pavlov dog of sorts. Like make money, get the good stuff, go home. Don't make money, get in trouble, can be concerned about your existence, stay at work.
Yeah, I mean the Sea Org and the local staff, because it filters down to the Class 5 orgs, they're in this thing where they're stuck on their goal and their postulate, and they're in the zone and they're trying to achieve that, and they're actually doing it right, because when you want to go and achieve something, you just put all your attention on it, you just ignore everything else around you, and you go, I'm achieving this is what I'm doing, I'm not going to get distracted by that, and you focus on your goal and you go boom, and that's how you get it done, right? But the problem though with that is when you're in the Sea Org is you do that week after week, you're focusing on your stat, or you're focusing on building the new ideal org or something. And so you can have all this crap going and you ignore it because you go, I'm just focusing on this and you're going to achieve it. But then some people, I imagine, that the outpoints don't pile up. Whereas for someone like me, when I was involved with the church, it was like I was doing things and I was kind of ignoring the outpoints, and then they just pile up to a point where I go, hold on a second, these outpoints need to be addressed. But I imagine the Sea Org people, they're just so busy focusing on their goal and their postulate that they don't address the outpoints and actually look at what's going on.
Well, again, I think there's a couple of things that you've got to address with inside what you're saying. So, like, a Sea Org member's not at home; they're not able to go anywhere and do anything or question anything. And questioning your environment in the Sea Org is actually paramount to being a suppressive. It's what you're taught that suppressives do. It's like, because the Sea Org is the epitome of everything.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that even if you did notice there was a lot of outpoints, you didn't have the time and you weren't even allowed to try and investigate them, so you just had no choice but to focus on your stat for that week.
Well, yeah, and the outpoints, and then you get over the outpoints, but again, it's coming back to, it's a miswithhold. So then but a miswithhold means that you're doing something wrong. So you questioning this outpoint is not their outpoint, it's yours. And and no one will agree to you because you're putting your outpoint onto a situation. So you think the church is wrong in this regards. What have you done? And you'll go into a meter and put on the meter, and they'll go, what crimes have you done to Scientology to think this way? Like you're not going to ever win that conversation because they've always made it so that you're wrong. And you look at all you look at all your courses, you look at all your attestations, you look at all your sec checks. Everything revolves around what have you done? Why are you not doing this into the church? Why aren't you doing more? You're a recruiter. Why aren't you joining to do more to help your planet? It's sort of like they really try and make it your responsibility, and the Sea Org members swallow that pill. They swallow it hardcore, mate. And so like, why aren't you doing more? And so you do more. You spend 20 hours on a Thursday trying to get your stats up. Like, so many people pull all-nighters on a Wednesday night just to try and get their stats up.
Yeah, and that's when I was involved as well, because I was kind of just like, when things like that happen, I kind of was just like, come on, you're taking it too far. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, we've got to save the planet, and I want to expand the Sea Org and all that sort of stuff, but there's a thing where that, like, you can work too hard, and it can actually cause you problems. You know what I mean? So you don't want to go into that territory, do you?
Well, again, but that's not a thing, because you can't, like, how much would you give to save the planet? How much time have we got left? And one of the things that even David Miscavige still totes is that we're running out of time, but we've been running out of time for 50 fucking years, man. It's sort of like, you can't really be saying you're running out of time when it's the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Can't you just say, oh, okay, the dwindling spiral's here, we've failed and we've lost, so let's try and salvage things and improve things. Do you know what I mean?
But that's also like the statement that I use is that, can't you just go a little bit harder for just a little bit more time to save the planet? Is one more soul going to be saved? And they will tout that you're doing the best thing by donating all the time. But I think one of the biggest things about this is that everyone is doing it.
Yeah, so you just get involved in it, yeah.
You don't see any problem with it. And if you question it, you've got your out ethics, and you've got your own out points, and you need to be handled in ethics, and HCO needs to be called in, and that spiral. Again.
I noticed when it comes to spotting out points or noticing, I guess, aberration, was that you need to be outside and then look in. I noticed that was a big part of it. You need to leave the Sea Org and then think about and then look at the information and see what was wrong with it, or leave the church, or even in our society and stuff, leave the education system, do something else, and then go and look at it and go, hold on a second, did I get a really crap education? Like, I noticed that when you're in something, you can't notice what's wrong with it. It's only when you're out of it that you notice.
And there's, like, I think most school of thoughts actually go into that and saying that. And the church will try and tote it, the difference, by saying you actually don't need to do that. All you need to do is look at it in a new unit of time. You've probably heard that statement. Just look at it in a new unit of time to figure out what the problem is. So they're trying to sort of obviously reinforce that you don't look at the Scientology outpoints. But every school of thought totes that you need to be exterior. It's from Christianity to Buddhism.
It's something about there being a two-terminal universe. It really makes a difference. I noticed it when I was because now I'm making 2 podcasts, and I was working on the second one, and when I was working on the second one, coming up with like a little script, and the one about flying saucers, then I could notice outpoints with the first one and go, hold on, and now I can fix up things with the first one, then I'll go back to the other one, and somehow it was really good. I was like, wow, this is really a good way of doing things. So
one of the things the church tries to do with that is they try and get you, and that's one of the ways they get you to do more work, is that you accept more, you upgrade the level of how hard things are. You're always able to confront the thing before you. An example of that would be, if you can't drive a car properly, drive a stick shift.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you learn how to drive stick shift, even if you're driving a stick shift badly, you can always drive an auto 100%. Like, you're great at an auto.
I know, and it's out it's our gradient basically. Yeah, do you know what I mean?
But they want to jump the gradient so you can do the gradient step before it, but you're not trained to do the. Again, it's one of the church's things you can argue point blank. It's all like, we want you to jump the gradient so that you can confront the gradient that you're not confronting, so you can do the gradient that steps after it. Like,
It's
okay,
like it's deep philosophy, right? And it's not like Hubbard's wrong, but it's just they take things out of context and they twist them sort of, and they make it like, as in, I get the idea that it's like, okay, you got a problem, so then double the problem, and then suddenly you'll bring your confront up and you go boom, and it works in certain areas, but it's not 100%
yeah,
right
they
to
don't
apply.
work. Like, let me give you the reason that I don't believe that is the solution. Because let's say you're trying to solve a problem, so why would you double the problem to solve the first one when you got the second one you can't do? You're always going to be
Because
solving the
then,
next
no,
problem.
because then if you double the problem, then you'll stop your life and you'll change everything, and you go, oh my god, I'll solve this car problem, and then I
Sorry,
can.
that's actually not the context they're trying to sell. They're trying to say, if you've got a problem with your car, make sure that you've got a problem with the public transport as well, because once you've got the public transport as a problem, your car will be fixed. But you still got a fucking public transport problem.
No, but don't they do more? They say double the car problem.
Yeah, there is that, but
So, so
but you can only solve one of them.
But
You're not
no,
solving
but
both.
what I'm saying is that I understand the idea how it can be a usable, workable little trick in a certain situation,
Yeah,
right? But the thing is that, of course, whenever you're dealing with the church or whatever, they pull little bits of ideas from Hubbard and stuff, and they apply them, and they say this is all the time, and they just misapply things.
yeah, and you know what? I'm going to agree with you 100%. And I can give you an example in Scientology where it's where that's actually evident. It's actually against the finance. It's actually finance policies to reg someone who
Oh
doesn't have.
yeah, like the
So
loan thing. The loan thing.
yeah, well, not
Yeah,
even so. Like, if you can't pay for a course, your finance policies that you should be applying on yourself means that you shouldn't be paying for that course.
yeah, I know. Yeah,
So don't take out your credit cards and everything else. You don't buy that course.
yeah, yeah.
But because it's our finance policies. Now, they've got different policies that the church will push to say that, but and I've heard it explained really well. They've gone, the policy that they're violating is actually ESTO steps. Like, work out a way to apply the person to make more money so you can take that money away from them, obviously. But that's not what they apply. They just want you to pay more money so that you've got this course paid for, because that'll handle their stat, and then you're good for another 6 months. Like, then you've got to come in and they've got to register. They're going to reg you when you walk in through the front door because there's something else they want to sell.
That's one thing I didn't. Yeah, I like how they pick and they choose which policy to follow, because it was like in in one area it's like it just basically whatever suits whatever particular staff member that week that you're dealing with and whatever their stat is. But anyway, so you. I'm interested in how you got into it and why you dived into the Sea Org so quick. So can you explain how you got into Scientology?
I was recruited with two friends of mine. So what happened was 9/11 happened. 9/11 obviously was a great tragedy, and the Sea Org responded to that tragedy by sending out various missions with from an organization they called New World Call.
Oh wow.
So one of those recruiters, her name was Nola Vaines, came to Sydney and was in Sydney Org trying to recruit people through the flag to be trained as superpower auditors, because they saw superpower as the solution for the Earth's destruction. So a friend of mine was doing a basic course at the AO in Sydney, and he was picked up as a possible recruit. And Nola Vaines was a very good recruiter, don't get me wrong. And she worked on him for the time that he was there, and she was able to find what his tragedy was, like what
His ruin.
His ruin, yep. And she was able to recruit him to become a superpower auditor. He's then come back to. I was originally from Newcastle. So he came back home and spoke to another friend who was the one who put him on course at the AO, and her daughter knew Scientology and decided that she wanted to change her life and to do something positive as well. And look, I was not in a good. I was not looking at a favourable career choice. I was in IT, but not really doing much and not really understanding what I was doing. And my friends said that they were going to go over to America, and look, I've gone I don't. I have nothing else going for me. My friends are doing this. Why don't I go and help them and see what it's all about? So I said, okay, let's go. And literally, that's one again. So as soon as I made up my mind, like what they tell you in Scientology, you can make things go right so that it happens automatically. And I made things go right, and I sold all my stuff. I quit my job. I gave everything to my parents, and I got on a plane and I flew. That was my first ever plane trip and first ever time really leaving the state by myself. And I flew to America. Landed in Clearwater, Florida, got snapped up, and so that's really the shortened version of what happened. But this is where it becomes once you enter the system, it's very difficult to leave, as you would have experienced through Melbourne. So I came.
Well, sort of. I mean, it's nothing compared to the Sea Org, but yeah, it's like that. Yeah.
But so I came in and like my whole life is now managed, and you come in and you're with like-minded people who are trying to do the same thing, and you start on courses and you're learning little bits and pieces, and you're applying these information and you think that it's right, so you continue to sell a little bit of your soul and invest a little bit more, and you do the EPF, and then you go on to what Flag had, Flag Readiness Unit, which was the FRU, which is basically another, before you go on to full-time staff, you report to someone else in senior HCO. So you do that for a couple of months or a couple of weeks, but in my case, a couple of months. And basically you get posted inside the organization, but from about the time you get into the organization, you've given up so much of yourself into the credence or the belief that you're not going anywhere. So you start moving around and you start doing a job, and that's basically how I fell in. Like, it was very quick. I went over there to see what was happening, but once I got into the mechanism, it's very hard to get out of that. And it's sort of like, you don't want to be wrong, you don't want to let people down, you want to do your job, so you just stay in the system.
So when would you say that you actually felt like you were a Scientologist?
Look, I think that I was lucky in the fact that I didn't. Like, I knew how to apply the tenets of Scientology, but because of the way that I came in, I always felt a little bit of an outsider.
And you were just there on an adventure.
Well, in some respects, yes, but I was always saw myself as not being like a part of the people. Like, you had these people coming in who are OT or clear or grades or whatever, and you came in as literally as a WOG. Like, that was your demon. That was what you were known for. And my story got known really quickly by a lot of people. So everyone, even years later, would want to know how, like, you joined the Sea Org.
You joined the Sea Org without even being a SIO. It's interesting.
Without doing a course, like,
yeah.
Wow, that's so, like, OT of you.
That's such a Sea Org response.
But you're constantly having that brought up, so you're constantly seeing yourself as not quite a part of the structure. And that's really, in the end, the same thing that they were trying to tout as the reason that I was there was also the reason that I could leave, is because I didn't see myself. They made me not see myself as a part of the group. So in the end, it was all like, hey, hang on a second. This is all me. You guys don't see who I am, but I'm starting to believe in myself. So let's go and see what you guys are actually saying about the real world.
So I can understand, like, the first 2 years because it's just an interesting experience. But how could you keep on going, like, helping a group that you didn't even really believe in the religion and the whole goal of Scientology?
Well, because you've sold yourself, you've blinded yourself to the out points again. It's sort of like, you're seeing that you're listening to the positives. You're being rewarded. You're doing something. You have friends who are affording the same thing. You're not connected. Like, in some ways, I disconnected from family. Like, I wouldn't speak to them for 3 to 6 months. Like, you don't develop friends outside the church.
Yeah, but when you got up in the morning in the Sea Org in the last few years, for example, like, how did you get up and actually bother producing stuff if you didn't even really believe it?
Look, I think my break came about a year before I left, and my break was very significant for me, and it started my whole questioning action. Like, what you're asking is not so much how did I sign on, is but more how did I leave. Look, I'm blown. I walked out one night. I went to have dinner at 7 o'clock at night, and I walked to the airport from Clearwater to Tampa Airport. I walked from 7 o'clock at night until 5 a.m. in the morning. I got into a rental car and I drove to Miami. I returned the rental car in Miami. I took a bus through to Washington, D.C. I got my passport and I was out of the country. Look, what made me leave is there's a different amount of things that made me leave, but I started to realize the lies that were in the system by what was happening to me. So in the end, I decided that obviously I didn't want to go through any of the actions that were going to be deemed for me for questioning why things were happening. And that's the big thing, because as soon as you start to question, you're seen as a problem. And I knew that if I didn't leave, someone would try and sell me something to stay. I actually realized in that split second that I had already made up my mind, and it wasn't what I was actually wanting anymore. So yeah, mate, I walked out. I walked for a good 8 hours across the Clearwater Causeway to get to the airport. Like, if you want to Google how far that is, just do Clearwater, Florida to Tampa Airport, and you'll see that there's a big ass causeway in the middle of it. I
Yeah.
walked.
Is a causeway like their word for freeway?
No, mate. Causeway is there's a harbour, but Clearwater and Tampa are separated by water.
Oh, so
So
it's
you
like
actually have to cross like a bridge of sorts, but it's not. It's like the rock face. It's actually a landmass that they've built, so it's a causeway across the water.
okay. So when you left, was it that you had noticed outpoints and you felt like you wanted to leave, or did you have something big, outrageous happen to you that made you like get annoyed and want to leave?
Look, I had both, and for me personally, I had both. I had something big. I was the purchaser FSO for years, and I left Post because I was in trouble from different terminals. But one of the mistakes that happened was I found a business to take on the postage of the source mag. It's a very involved story, but I was being pulled into a ComEv based on information which wasn't correct, and that later I proved as being incorrect. And the person got and I submitted it to everyone that was on my ComEv. The next staff meeting, that person got an award for production, and basically they'd false reported their stats. So that was the first thing. The second thing is my relationship with my partner, my wife, was coming to an end, and she wanted to be more in Scientology, so she didn't apply Scientology to ending our relationship. I was then something else was happening, and it was sort of like I was looking at, I'd been noticing the outpoints, and then I got myself into trouble again because I was noticing the outpoints, and I've basically started to say, well, hang on a second, why am I getting trouble for noticing outpoints? Like, it's very cliche, but why should I be in trouble for questioning the system that tells me to question everything? And I was going to get in trouble again. And I just walked out and said, do I really want to go through this a second time? Like, I've already taken so much effort to make myself right the first time. Do I really want to do that again? And then I thought, like, you know what? No, I don't. my time come to an end in the Sea Org? And at that point, I've gone, yes, it has. Okay, so what do I do next? And I said, well, I go home, and I picked my stuff up and I walked.
Did they do any chasing you down?
Oh, look, I'm just found out recently that my blowing was seen because the basics had just come out. My blowing had been seen as suppressives blowing off of because of the basics. So they justified it. Because the other thing is, I had been involved in helping find people, so I knew some of the tricks.
Oh.
So I took actions to mitigate the risk.
Yeah.
So they had no way in hell of finding me.
What are some of the tricks?
Obviously, the simple things like use cash whenever possible. If you're going to take money out, make sure that you go into a bank to actually withdraw it, because then you can sign something. But also try and Western Union it to yourself into another place. You need to and then
Why should you walk into a bank? I didn't get that.
Because they will try and stop your card being used.
Oh, okay.
So they'll call the bank and actually have your card suspended. Or they'll try multiple attempts. So you walk into a bank, you've got your driver's license, you've got your card, you take all your money out, and then you leave quickly as possible. You don't sit there and when you fill out the information, like when you go to a hotel, you pay in cash because then it's on your card.
Yeah.
You connect your phone straight away.
How can they cancel your card? Is that because you had an org card or an org credit card?
Like, think about the story that you probably went over this in your last episode. The story that they called DM when they thought his father was having a heart attack. It's sort of like they know these things. They trace you. They track you. They know that they'll get your ex-wife, or they'll get your wife, or they'll get your friends to tell what bank that you bank with is, and then they'll call the bank and say, "Hey, I'm Joe Blow. Someone's trying to use." They will do whatever. Like the statement that they use is that they'll use any. They're trying to help you so that every single thing that they do wrong is actually for your own good. Help me, help you type situation.
So what exactly did you do that enabled you to get away so easily?
So the first thing is I walked. I didn't call anyone. I literally walked and decided that I needed to go into a direction that was not known, like go away from major milestone or major areas.
But you went to the airport.
Yeah, I did, but I didn't walk straight to the airport. I walked north for about 4 hours, then east, then a little bit south, and then came back up and around.
Were you worried about them picking you up on the side of the road?
Yeah, 100%, mate.
And so you intentionally took a windy course, like an unusual track or something?
Yep.
Because if you did, there. But you did say you took the causeway though, so it isn't that is that some main road though? That's like a classic main road that they know?
That was the only risk that I had, and in my story, that was the riskiest move that I did, but it was the most necessary because I had to do it anyway. But mate, I saw the flag truck drive by me 3 times.
And they didn't recognise you? They
didn't recognise me. Or he wasn't looking for me at that area because he didn't expect me to be there at that stage.
Did you put try and put disguises on or something?
You don't have any, all I could do was take my tie off. You have no ability, because you have nothing. I wasn't even able to go home to get my stuff to leave with. I literally had what was in my pockets and on my back.
And so when you got to the airport, you paid with stuff with cash?
Yep. Oh, well, no, actually, because a lot of people will use Tampa Airport to leave via flights. So leave it via car. So I left via car, and I drove to Miami. So as soon as I got to Miami, I returned the car and I paid in cash. And no transaction was recorded against any card.
Yeah, I mean, when you first mentioned what you did, I did instantly think, yeah, that's a good way of going about it. I mean, I guess except the causeway thing, I thought that sounded a bit risky, but like you said, you had to do it. But I did like the idea of you going to the airport, then driving to Miami. It just seems like an odd thing to do. And it's just, Yeah, I would probably do something like that if I was in your shoes.
Yeah, but like one of the things that they don't tell you and that can be possible is that obviously you're going to try and go to places that you know, right? So you're gonna, like in my case, I would try and return home or go somewhere that I know. So they have travel agents who can check. You can check who's on a flight. All you need to know is what the person's name is and who you're looking for and where they're going. You can't do a random search across every single airline. But if you go, okay, who's flying to Los Angeles at 2 o'clock? Is Joe Blow on that flight? You can find that person. So I traveled to via car to Miami and then via bus from Miami to Washington DC because I also needed to get a passport. So the if the church was looking for me, they would know that I would need to make it to Washington DC. But I took my time to get there by taking the long route.
Was anyone waiting for you back in Australia?
From the church, no. Family, yes. But then I didn't. So when I got back to Australia, I don't think the church was actually looking for me at that point. But I contacted friends who were not Scientologists, and I said, "Can you come and pick me up and take me home?" Because I said, "I just don't know if they've got my family under investigation." Because that's what we did. That's what they did. They would try and track someone down by keeping their family under inspection.
And you worked for a bit on staff in this area.
Sorry?
When you're on staff, you worked for a bit in that area.
Look, so no, but the thing is that the church locks down a lot of communication terminals. One of the biggest communication terminals they lock down is the internet. I was one of 5 people who were allowed to access the internet. So if you needed information on flight information, I was the person you would ask. If you needed to find hotels in certain areas, I was the person to ask. If you needed mail, like we had a guy who disappeared to Dakota Beach. If you needed to find out the hotels within a certain radius of a certain, and he accessed his card, right? So if you needed to find hotels in a certain radius of someone accessing their card, you would ask me. Like that changed years later to be solely the security, and security would do their blow drill. But I learned enough during those times to be able to modify what I was going to do.
How much auditing did you do when you're in the church in training?
Look, not enough, and not as much as what would have been my entitled to. So I got through Purif and started on I believe I started on my objectives, but auditing was a reward. My training, I got through my hatting, I got through the different things that I needed to do my job. Like you need to do a car course if you want to drive a car.
Even though you already know how to drive a car.
Yes.
Okay.
You got to do the Scientology driving course.
Okay. Well, what sort of data is in that? Like the cycle of action or something?
Well, like how to change, like what's a carburetor, what's a radiator, what's the different things inside of a car, how to do, like, then you would have to get like clay demo different road rules, and you would then have to drive around certain things. And so like, yeah, man, I was an adult male when I went over to America. It's like I already had my driver's license. I had an international driver's license. And so like, but you have to go through the Scientology driving course. Oh, because if you have an accident, you're PTS, right?
Yeah.
So you needed to go through how to identify if you're PTS, so that you don't drive.
Interesting. So I noticed that with the Melbourne organ, when it came to training up staff members, the hat packs and stuff were in a bit of a mess, and some of them were just so ridiculously long. So one person who wanted to be a bookseller had spent like a year and a half studying this hat pack that was just outrageously big, and it was messed up. So with the same thing with Flag, where the hat packs were just, there's something out pointy about them?
The out pointy thing with the hat packs is that they are, you had the different gradations. Like you obviously had, because as a purchaser FSO, I had a hat pack for being a purchaser, but then there was a hat pack for Div 3, and then there's a hat pack for the org, and then there's a hat pack for something else. It's like you can never actually complete the course. Like,
Yeah, so that's what it was like in Melbourne, where it was just like to choose a post, to learn that post, and officially finish the training for it. I mean, it was just ridiculous because it took forever.
But then it's also like, how much time do you have to study it? So like,
Yeah.
you meet 10 hours a week, but like, honest to God, like I met very few staff members who did 10 hours a week. In the last 2 years I was at the church, I probably didn't do 10 hours a month. It's sort of like, there's no way to manage yourself and get yourself through everything if you're on course. So like, it's very difficult. And for me, it was even more difficult. It's like, you're in Florida buying things that are across the planet, across the country. So you're trying to get ahead of yourself on your stats in Florida, but by the time you need to finish, you can only call California. So it's sort of like California's not open until after 12.
You're not an independent Scientologist, are you?
No, not anymore, mate.
No?
No.
Not anymore. So did you do some independent Scientology?
Look, I looked into it and attempted to see if I could get what I was under the belief that my case needed to be handled when I left. And I reviewed a lot, like the Western Plains podcast.
Yeah, the Scientology outside the church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, and that was a wealth of information, and it made me review some of the things that I'd learned. But I think a lot, like as soon as I saw going clear, I handled everything in regards to me leaving.
Did you do a leaving church repair list?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Because I think everyone who leaves has charge on the whole issue and that sort of stuff.
Well, again, it's sort of like, and even in yourself, it's sort of like the church says a lot of different things, but like, don't you have charge on everything that you do, and you leave in any way, shape, or form? Like even a job, you leave a job, if it's even if it's take on a new job, you still have some charge on it. It's sort of like, and again, you've given up 10 years of your life, or in my case, 6, and you're doing 7 days a week, 16-hour days. Of course, I'm going to be slightly messed up.
Yeah. Hold on, let me see. I don't think I have that many more questions, actually.
One of the biggest things that happened and the realizations that I've had since leaving was a lot of staff are PTS.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't realize how PTS until you actually leave that you actually are. One of the biggest transitions for me was like the Sea Org allows you to yell at people for no reason whatsoever, as long as you're right. Like walking into any career that I've taken subsequent to that, I've always had to check that feeling, because you're not right, you're wrong, no matter which way you do it. But they don't see that as a mistake. Have you ever tried like yelling at a senior in the real world, and the guy just going, "All right, see ya, there's the door," and he's going, "What? But I'm allowed to, right?" No, I'm sorry. And a lot of the stuff and a lot of the tricks that the church does, and a lot of people who would listen to this who are still in the same position I was. One of the biggest things is that you can question it. You have a look at what's behind the scenes. Like you may not right now think L. Ron Hubbard's not telling the truth, but honest to God, mate, it's the biggest con that I've ever been involved in.
Yeah, the church is quite the interesting thing. It's epic. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, and so like,
I mean, the thing about Miscavige is it seems like, because I believe in all the conspiracy theories and stuff, so I reckon that he's some sort of government plant or something. So he's there looking as if he's trying to promote and help Scientology, whereas he's doing all these things to shut it down and not promote it. So he's just a liar. He's just full on lying.
I'm sorry, mate. I'm also big into conspiracies, but I think you're giving the guy too much credit. You've rewarded a person for being brutal and antagonistic and aggressive, and you put him in front of an organization that he's been able to get away with that for the whole time. I really don't think there's anyone else behind Miscavige. I reckon that once Miscavige, whatever happens to him and he decides to leave, I think that a lot of people will quickly come to the realization that he was a criminal, but Scientology won't change. It fosters that belief that its leaders are all powerful or seeing or knowing. It's sort of like, if you have a look at the history of L. Ron Hubbard, it's sort of like the guy basically had mental health issues when he was, and he was compulsive writer. If you write so many words and so many things, of course you're going to get a couple of things right, but like the upper OT levels are auditing body thetans. Like, maybe the guy thought that we were being taken over by aliens. You know what the funniest story I'll give you from Scientology is? That if you were at Flag and you said that you believed in aliens, you'd be sent off the base.
I know, I heard something like that. Hold on a second though. I heard that it can stop you from going up the bridge, right? But what do you mean you can get sent off the base? I mean, is that an exaggeration, or what are you talking about?
No, it would stop you going up the bridge because you wouldn't be allowed to be in any Flag building or in Clearwater. They would try and kick you out of Clearwater permanently. So
because what, they think you might be an out PR public.
No, they think you're a loon. But Scientology is an extraterrestrial religion.
I know. Did you see an example of this when you were involved?
I saw example.
Tell that story. I find that interesting.
Like, I look, the funniest, like, there was just a public who had come in and had actually said that she believed in aliens, because it's actually a sec check question. Like, do you believe in? And like, for being on Flag Land Base, they would actually ask you, do you believe in aliens? And if you answered yes, they would try and pull, why do you believe in aliens, right? And this woman stated that she believed in aliens because she was abducted by them.
Yeah.
Well, like, she was like sent for the crazy bin.
This wasn't on an A to J. This wasn't on an A to J check. It was just like a sec check or something.
It was one of the flag. I believe it's one of the flag checks.
So before you get to allowed on services.
Yeah.
So it was basically like an A to J check to check if someone's okay to come into the org. So they thought that she was insane, and they don't want to let an insane person on lead lines.
Yeah, an OT, mate. Like, you're meant to be able. You're meant to act clear. Everything's meant to be good, right?
Well, so this person was already OT.
Yeah. Like,
I know. Talk about the confusions. Jesus.
Like, you're not allowed to believe in aliens, but you're in a religion of aliens. So, like, the medical histories. So, like, if someone was a medical threat to the base, they were like. There's a story about a gentleman who was put on a park bench outside the org, and the ambulance called. That's completely true. He was literally suffered a heart attack or stroke. He was taken out of the AO. He was put on a park bench, and the ambulance was called
for PR.
We had another woman who had her thyroid flared up, and she went into almost a mental breakdown of sorts. They tried to institutionalize her in Clearwater psychiatric ward at the hospital.
Oh, so this was a reverse. This time they were trying to send her into a psych ward.
And this is the biggest thing, is like, if Scientology states that, like, they're going to help the people, well, how are they going to help all the psychiatrics? They're not going to give them service. Anyone who's got a mental health issue needs to be handled by someone. Look, have a look at what the mental health industry is trying to do before you start badgering them again. Like, they just don't help people.
Well, why this time is because, like, the whole Lisa McPherson thing is usually them avoiding going to the psych wards, and it causes problems. So why in this situation were they trying to push this person to the psych ward? Because
that's the only way that they could get the person handled off the radar and away from them.
So they were worried it was going to be a big PR flap, so just like, get him to the psych ward and that's it, PR flap.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Look, one of the other things is that one of the things that I haven't seen much information on, is that Lisa McPherson, the guy who was responsible, they say that DM was responsible as her CS, right? That's the conspiracy theory, right? And it's probably true. I just don't know it. But there was a gentleman who was at Flag who was a staff who was actually meant to have been her CS. He was busted to he was dry cleaning IC or something. So he was busted to one of the lowest posts. It was like a class 5, or he was amazing CS, but he wasn't allowed to go onto the RPF because the court case was still happening.
Mm.
As soon as the court case got finalised, he was RPF'd within a week.
Mm.
So they have ways of shutting people up as well.
And it seems like that was all caused by DM.
Well, that's one of the lines I'm hearing, but like the CS who took control of that literally stayed during the whole court case as the dry cleaning IC. As soon as that finished, he went to the RPF. I just looking at that, going and hearing the stories subsequent to leaving, and it's like, are you serious? And it wasn't even your fault, yet you took the blame for it. How does that help Scientology? Unfortunately, I've heard that he's passed away as well, but comes as a big surprise. It doesn't come as a big surprise, does it?
All right. So, what wins did you get from Scientology?
One of the things that I believe that I got from there, and I don't know if it would have happened anyway, but one of the is basically a belief in myself. That the whole tone 40. If you put something, if you can't do something, you're creating the barrier to it.
Mm.
Like, I've found that so many times in my life, and I've just got to give the universe its credit and make sure that whatever I'm doing, I'm going to pay my dues and allow the universe to have its pushback, because I know if I put my mind to it, I can actually overcome all those challenges. I handled my communication. I handled different aspects of things that I was scared of as a child. And look, you know what? As soon as I went overseas to the church, I was able to travel to different other places around the planet, and there's some very beautiful places to be and see. So it allows me, and originally coming from Newcastle, look, I moved to Melbourne because I for work, but I would never have done a move like that if I was not in the church. But again, that's because of when it happened. That's what I can say. It. My major wins are those. My wins are my friends who I've now been able to reconnect with. Like, I have friends all over the planet, and we share a common bond now, which is running away from the Church of Scientology, because they're the only ones who can talk to me. So I have those experiences. And look, I've done a lot of different things because I was in the church. I've worked with the Red Cross. I've worked as a courier. I've done multiple different, and I have so many life stories because of that. And yeah, so that's the major thing, the major win I take from Scientology.
I noticed a really similar thing because I'm independent Scientologist, so I don't like the church and stuff. But I do sometimes think of the church, and I think, well, you can go in there and you can get benefit from it, and what the big benefit is the fact that it is so tough, because it tells someone, you harden up. You toughen up, you can achieve anything, and you make it go right. And it's like, it's a tough attitude, but it's a good attitude that I think a lot of people can benefit from.
Look, and I've seen where it's in my life, it's been of benefit in some cases, and unfortunately, there's also, when you couple that in being able to communicate aggressively to anyone who's your superior or junior in a negative way, it can also be detrimental. But one of the things I did learn from it is that, like, don't take things at face value. Always question before you meter out ethics actions. Like, there's a gradient scale for a reason. Like, tell the person what they're doing wrong, explain to them, and go up the ethics gradients with the person. A lot of what Scientology teaches is not what it practices. So. Understanding that and going back on and looking at how that can be changed for your own existence. But again, it's all like a lot of like my biggest thing the biggest thing I've learned is probably in the last couple of months is just that look, it's a very big, snarling animal. It's so scared of every single person who comes out that it's trying to suppress everything. And it's actually okay to be an ex-Scientologist. And I think that's, or even an ex-FSO staff member. It's so like, we're not a lot of people, because obviously there's not a lot of people who go through to flag and sign that contract. And then so like, and in so saying, it's so like, we're actually changing, like there's so many things that we can change just because owning up to our responsibility and getting our stories out there in some way.
I noticed that Flag, in particular, like other SEAL members have it, but Flag SEAL members have it, like that hardcore antagonism, that like just this brutalness about them. I don't notice it in you, which I find interesting. Did you used to have that when you were involved with the Sea Org and you lost it, or?
And that's one of the things that's been tempered in my history. But like, it's the righteous indignation that we can express in ourselves. Like, you cross us and what we're trying to do, we will brutally destroy you and push forward our own agenda. Look, that's still a part of my makeup. It's just not a part of who I want to be. And it's taken me a long time to understand that who I was in the church is not who I am. And you probably find that with a lot of staff members, because I don't define myself anymore as an ex-FSO. I define myself as an ex-Sea Org Scientologist. And not defining myself as ex-FSO means that I have taken away that little bit of bitterness. Because FSO sees itself so much better than the AO in Sydney. It sees it so much better than the CLOs. It sees itself as, and they're pompous, and we're pompous.
Yeah, it's like this elitist attitude. It's like, hey, blah, 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 blah. It's like, that's not how you do a touch assist. And it's like this aggressive form of Scientology. It's like, whoa.
Also, as you like, and these people are beautiful, are beautiful people. But you'll see it even more with people who haven't accepted that they're with their ex-int. Like, you'll see it for even going up higher, because like ex-PC, ex-CMO, it's sort of like these people have it even harder, because they're the 1%ers of the 1%ers.
Yeah.
They're like, there's only a handful of these people. So I see it a lot more in them as well. But look, for my time and for the efforts that I did, it's sort of like, of course I see myself. I know that I had a lot to overcome, and as soon as I started taking away the labels, like and actually accepting some of the other ones, I have to accept the label of a suppressive person, mate. That's the most hilarious thing on the planet. Like, I laugh every time I think of myself as an SP. It's sort of like, I'm the most scariest creature that Scientology's created, and they're the ones who gave me the label.
Do you
give to someone?
Do you think that that people come into the Sea Org not being or come into the maybe Flag not being antago, but then it just makes them into these antago people, and that their COB's valence has permeated the Sea Org, so everyone's in COB's valence and in their antago?
Well, I'm
because the reason I was thinking, hold on a second, it's kind of like short man syndrome, but like a more short man syndrome. And then you think about it and you go, hold on a second, yeah, David Miscavige is a short man. He runs the Sea Org. He's got a bit of that short man syndrome, fighting bull attitude, and his personality has permeated the whole of the Sea Org. So they're all in David Miscavige's short man syndrome valence.
Again, mate, and so like we'd probably disagree on this, but I think it's actually like LRH's valence that everyone's trying to fall into. Like, LRH was a person who didn't like people, who actively spoke against.
Well, one of his valences, I'd say.
Yeah, well, and again, but you look at his work ethic. You look at what he said, what his work ethic was like. The man worked 16-hour days. So what do? We work 16-hour days. He gets limited sleep, but he's then pushing people up the bridge. That's what we attempted to do. But I don't. Again, I think we give a little bit of DM, a little bit on the conspiracy front, a little bit too much. It's sort of like I honestly think the guys. Yeah, I think he's got a short man. I would say a short man syndrome. If Osa is listening to this, I don't apologize for that. I really do think he's got a short man syndrome.
Yeah, he really does fit the characteristics of it, because it's like, I know it's because I spoke to someone else who seemed to have short man syndrome, and he was short, and they have this puppy dog bulldog fight where it's like, this is my belief, this is how it is, and if anyone challenges it, I'm fighting back, and it's like, whoa, calm down.
Yeah,
like,
the funniest one is if you actually think about the television show Shrek. It's sort of like there's all your characters. You add Leah Remini's Scientology: The Aftermath. You have the full characters against the evil dictator who's running the planet, who's a short man trying to wheedle out anyone who's got an opinion or anyone who's different. It's sort of like it's the cast of Shrek all over again. So it's an amazing it's the picture that he wants to create, but DM is he's an amazingly the only interactions I have are through other people. But yeah, dude, seriously, the stories I heard from others are just, and again, these are all coming out for other parties now as well. But it's just, it's psychotic, right?
The more I look into it, the more I find out things where it's like I think, yeah, I made a good decision when I was leaving the church, because I didn't have anywhere near as much data, but I did have a lot of data that made me think, I'm better off being outside the church. And one of the things, for example, is how you brought up the person's talking about aliens and abductions and stuff. It's just if I was, because I'm making the podcast about flying saucers and stuff, if I was involved with the church, I would just be getting into so much trouble. They would just be suppressing me, saying, you're going to be a good little try-hard version of Tom Cruise OT. You know what I mean? They're forcing everyone to be try-hard versions of Tom Cruise,
Well, yeah, but dude, so the funniest thing is Scientology teaches that you're not alone on this planet, but then teaches you that you can't do anything by yourself, for yourself. You have to do everything. It's only up to you to solve everything. Yet there's a race of creatures out there who could solve all our problems. Why the hell don't you just dial one of them up on the e-meter and just say, hey guys, can you help us solve world hunger? That's what it's meant to do.
And when it comes to regging, they talk about considerations and stuff, but when it comes to going up the bridge, they're like, oh, you might be keyed in and you're mid-grade 3 and you got to finish your grade 3, and it's just dude, that's just a consideration. Stop having these considerations. You know what I mean? They just go, it's funny.
Yeah, and again, it comes back to the first couple of points we raised. It's they have a problem. They have something for everything.
Yeah.
They have a solution for everything. It may not be the right solution, but they have a solution for that solution as well. Because this is the bit that blows me away. And every time I look into it, every time I hear the stories, I just go, why? It's sort of why are you paying to be trained as a GAT2 when DM is meant to be... his only job is to make sure the tech is good. Yet now you have to pay him more money to make sure that he's telling you that the tech is good. That's his fucking job. Isn't it?
Well, the thing, yeah, and it's hold on a second, he did GAT 1 though, so what are you saying? He's made a mistake again or something, and it's just
he goes out there and spruiks all the changes and how everything's now 100% on source, yet 10 years later he's doing the same thing again.
Yeah.
For guys who have completed OT8  2 to 3 times, come on guys, what are you false testing every single time? Are you actually blatantly lying every time you walk in and hold the cans? There's got to be a point where you go, yeah, maybe I don't want to do OT8 for the 7th time. Maybe I've got hopefully I'm fully clear now, right? But you're clear, but you're not clear, right?
But
how many times do you go thing?
The truth is, though, that I mean, that's why it's small, because most people wake up to it. I just find it interesting the people who are still involved, because it's just like when I found out that there was GAT1 occurred in 1996, and David Miscavige said the same things, that this is going to transform Scientology and boom, and we're going to make all tech standard. And then he just did it again, and it's like, what the hell? Come on, people fall for this a second time, like.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. Like the biggest thing that I got from the biggest thing that you can get from Scientology is like just look at what they say and actually Google it. And like I remembered that in the last mag or something, there was a whole article about how freedom was coming to Pakistan. And I was lucky enough to help with the Red Cross in Pakistan. And so I knew a little bit about the area because you learn little bits and pieces. And basically, so I started Googling the Freedom Award winner who was getting the Way to Happiness books. And there's nothing on him in regards to the Way to Happiness anywhere, except in the one article for the Source Mag. And I'm going, if you were promoting the Source Mags, from promoting the Way to Happiness so much, wouldn't there be something about you promoting it?
I know.
Instead of being written to the Source Mag? Right? And that's the thing, is like, but no one questions that. No one decides to go out and go, oh wow, that guy who actually won the award, what did he actually do again?
Yeah, they just flash up data and stories and boom, 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 boom. It just sort of goes over your head and you don't have time to investigate any of the actual outpoints or discover that they're outpoints. But I want to clear this up as well, just in case anyone's listening who's a Sea Org member, because I feel like this interview would suit someone who's thinking of leaving the Sea Org. You know, I reckon Scientology tech is good, and you can get heaps of benefit from it. And I like the idea of doing it outside the church at Ron's org. So I just want to mention that, just in case anyone's, because when people are involved in the Sea Org, it's confusing because you get benefit from Scientology, and that the benefit side keeps you in. You know what I mean?
It's the expectation of that there is actually going to be a case gain in some respects, and honestly, it's sort of like I've accepted my role in life and said that a lot of people in your case will believe that there is Scientology benefit, and you have every right to believe that. I am not going to stop you from believing that. However, my realization came about when watching things like Going Clear. Listening to the stories, there was a lot of stuff that was really I started to see and to believe. And one of the reasons I could actually come out and speak to even yourself on a podcast is because my realization that Scientology is not actually what we think it is, because of the way that it was, because we started to look at the person. I never questioned L. Ron Hubbard when I left. I never questioned it. And a lot of Sea Org members never questioned L. Ron Hubbard. They have a problem with David Miscavige, or they have a problem with the handling at the church.
Oh, so when you left the Sea Org and you decided to leave and all that, you weren't questioning L. Ron Hubbard or anything. You were just questioning the outpoints with the Sea Org and what was wrong. Yeah, and did you feel like you were wasting your time?
Oh, look, when I left, it was sort of like I felt that I was the biggest criminal on the planet and I needed to get handled.
Oh, really?
No, I'm seriously, I still had those. I just believed that it was going to be easier for me to handle myself and go up the bridge if I left the Sea Org.
So you thought that you were a problem, but you did think there was a problems with the Sea Org, right? And they were in the wrong.
Yeah, I did see that there was. I questioned myself and my situation and my management and the people around me, but I never questioned the fact that the Sea Org, right? So I never questioned that the Scientology was wrong. I never questioned that L. Ron Hubbard was wrong. But when I started to look at the questions that I hadn't been asking, which was, do I believe in this tech? Is there actually any gains? What gains have I been getting? And then there was the line that came from one of the staff who left, which was, why do you pay yourself so little credit to having changed by yourself? Yeah. And this is one of the key things. And so, as we both would agree, we change every single experience that we allow ourselves to have is a change for the better. So if you're going to change anyway, why wouldn't you have come to this realization that you are a spiritual being without being connected to the Scientology? Like, it's just giving you a new, like, my time has given me a new framework to work with. But yeah, so my belief is that L. Ron Hubbard may have been taking the mickey. If you listen to the life outside of Scientology, I think there was a podcast where the staff member where he goes that leaving or blowing a situation is actually an ARC break.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah,
it's so like it makes more sense if you think about that you're leaving for an ARC break, right? But then why lie? Why is L. Ron Hubbard point blank lying to people to keep them involved in something? Why not tell them the truth that it's an ARC break? And then look at how like case gain works and how many OT8s are not achieving what they meant to achieve. There's like if you look into a Karen Delacare, she's like one of the only trained CSs currently alive on the planet. Like there's like 3 people left, and she's one of the highest trained people.
Yeah, class 12, I think there's not many class 12s.
And she's amazingly so. She's like everything trained to the hilt. Yet she's questioning Scientology and she's questioning the Sea Org. Like, if you think that if one portion could be wrong, there's the possibility that another portion could be wrong. If L. Ron Hubbard's policy letters can be taken the mickey out of and someone can corrupt them, then why can't someone corrupt the tech? And the tech that you're currently using, isn't that being corrupted as well then? Like, you know that it opens a world of possibilities.
Yeah, I find OT8 interesting and trying to work out the truth about that and if the tech was altered or is real. And anyway, that's just weird. But
as an independent Scientologist, I guess that your next set of questions with regards to how you approach it is like, if it has been altered, how do you find the correct information?
I know, yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, I personally, I think I'm just going off the attitude is as long as it's good and it's working, then I'll continue doing it and promoting it and that sort of stuff. I think that's the only way you can do it. You know,
that's what we need to approach life with as well, right? So like,
yeah, anything, yeah.
And again, that's one of the lessons that I've learned subsequent to leaving Scientology is that everyone's allowed, like, people are allowed to have an opinion. That's not what you get taught as an FSO staff member. People are meant to have your opinion. If they don't, you need to change them.
Yeah, it's brutal. It's the flag org. It's just like, yeah, it's interesting. It's just, and they're very they're almost like robots, aren't they?
Yeah, you know what? Like, again, so like the righteous indignation that you can spark in a staff member is amazing. Like, you try in any way stop a staff they believe their goal is, they will try and crucify you. Yeah.
Well, do you ever see someone just give up though, or is it always the person who's weaker in the argument that gives up?
No, it's whoever can call in. It's whoever's more upstat. So you don't have to be right. You just have to be upstat. So if you can pull out the policy that shows the person that they're wrong, you're now classified as being upstat because that person is lying and falsifying their stats because they have to be because they're not following the policy, right? So if you can find that policy letter that shows that you're right, then you're kosher. If you can yell at a person, you can send them out of your office, you can do that. But as soon as they find a little bit on you, you're like, it's just a never-ending circle, mate. Like,
it's just because when I was involved in Melbourne, you would have the occasional person come from the hardcore Sea Org. So they, I guess, were dealing with people who were like little puppy dogs compared to them. So it was a different scenario because they could yell and be like, this is how it is, and they could challenge. But I imagine it would be really interesting to see what it was like at Flag where you got 2 bulldogs fighting each other like aggressively.
Mate, we always believed that Lions was closer to L. Ron Hubbard, closer to ideal. So we were higher than Melbourne, but we were lower on the food chain than someone else. There is always a bigger dog. on the street in regard everywhere. Like in Clearwater, like was like at Flag, it was CMO, and then inside CMO there was a CMO chief off who was even higher. But then, and you could go through all the CMO org board, right? You've gone through your own, and everyone's higher than you in your own org board. Then you go to CMO, and everyone's higher in CMO. And then you've got RTC sitting over the top of all the Flag, right? But RTC, the terminals at RTC report to someone back at INT, right? So then they've got all their management structure. They may be at the top of the org board at Flag, and you think everything's good, but they're constantly reporting back. And then the dog sitting at the top is DM. Like he's got his hands in so many pies, it's unbelievable.
So, so after you left the Sea Org, when did you realise that you might have actually been right in the situation and that Scientology was wrong? Like, when did you not become a Scientologist, basically? And how'd that happen? Your whole what do they call it? Decompression stage, or explain that experience for you.
So, like, I'm not a person. I didn't get onto the ex-Scientology message board. I tried to make sure I limited my exposure to everything because I was still concerned that I would be tracked down in some way. And I was trying to reestablish my life, so I didn't want people to know what my past had been a part of. So I didn't put myself out there. So literally, I had started a couple of relationships, and I'd tell a couple of partners, and I had a couple of friends, and I basically, until about a couple of years ago, until about year 8, I think, or year 7, so 7 years after leaving, I could still count the amount of people who knew I was a Scientologist and an ex-SEAL member on my hands.
Yeah.
Like, the thing is, and around about the time, and it really, but I was always curious, and I was always trying to outreach, and I was always looking for people who had left who I was connected to. I had a couple of friends contact me through Facebook and sort of say, hey, it's great that you're out. And we would chat about our experiences, and I started to decompress. I've got to tout so amazingly was the Going Clear, the movie, that it's one of those things that allowed me to take my focus away from the church and put it onto Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard. As soon as I could take my attention off the church and actually question the tech, everything just fell into place. I stopped being a Scientologist. I started realizing what I had given up and what I had done and why it was so wrong. And that was the point where I started a very quick downward spiral and away from Scientology. That's when I started looking for message boards. That's when I started looking for, and I found the ex-Scientology message board. That's when I found other disconnection points. That's when I started to outflow and say, hey, I'm an ex-Scientologist. Can we have a chat about this? I'm at the point now where I will not actively tell anyone that I'm an ex-Scientologist, an ex-FSO member, but I'll also not tell them. If it comes up in conversation randomly, I will actually come out and say, yeah, I'm an ex-FSO staff member. So what do you got on that? And then start the conversation. It's sort of like, and people's reactions like, how did you get involved? How could you sell yourself, or how could you swallow that pill? It's all like, well, mate, everything you believe is true, but if you're going to sell an ideal scene where you can save everyone that you love by only giving up a little bit of your time, wouldn't you do that? And that's the biggest thing. It's like you're sold bits and pieces of the overall dream, and you give up a little bit, and you give up a little bit, and you give up a little bit until in the end you've given up
everything
of life.
Yeah.
And you've got nothing to show for it, but you're still believing but you've given it up so willingly. Like you can't sleep, you get $50, you all these things. You actually agreed to these things. It's like, I agreed to everything that happened to me. Everything that happened to me was because I agreed to it. And if I accept that, then I'm all good. But as soon as you question it, you go back to point zero, right?
The little bit by little bit is a good example, because I found it was like, I was going along in life, then you find Scientology, and it sort of shoots up your beingness or your ability to get things done and do what you want to do. You get those wins, but then you get more involved with the organization, and the organization, little bit by little bit, gobbles up your beingness, and your free time and what you want to do with your life, gobbles up a little bit more, and they're little compromises, you know what I mean? They compromise, then another one, and then next minute, you're fully wired into it, you're stuck, and your beingness is gone, and you're suddenly now a member of the group and the collective, and you're no longer yourself. And then at that point, you either are pissed off and you've seen enough outpoints where you make the decision to leave, or you never leave, and that's it. You're in, and you're just one of them.
Well, yeah, one of us. But like, I get the funniest one that I give it, like, you can explain to anyone, is like, you remember at graduation, your first ever graduation, where everyone stood up and started clapping for L. Ron Hubbard?
Yeah.
You remember that? Like, literally everyone, for some reason, random, like, they mentioned his name and everyone stood up and they started clapping, and you're sitting there and you see, going,
pretty funny. Yeah, I was like, what? Yeah, I was like, what?
Like, what? Like, and then, and you go, that's weird, right? That's crazy. I don't have to clap for L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah.
And then and then 6 months later, you're one of the first people, like,
yeah.
Okay, like, what changed? Nothing, except you took that reality and you wanted to fit in. And I guess that's one of the other things that, for yourself as well as for an FSO, for a staff member, it's like, you really want to fit in. You really want to be a part of that amazing organization who's set to change the world. Like, who wouldn't want to be a part of that? So you do everything in your power to become that.
Yeah. So for the first 7 years that you'd left, you still considered yourself a Scientologist, and were you planning on doing the bridge? You were still planning on doing the bridge or something, or?
I was still planning on doing the bridge. I was still planning on reconnecting. I was still planning on handling my problems. I still believed that the church had something for me, and that I still needed to handle my ethics. I touted, I still believed in the management tech. I still believed everything in the OSE volumes. I still believed that the best way to clean a window was with
ammonia.
Water. Like, I still believe that. Like, sorry?
It's ammonia with newspaper, right? Is that right?
No. Water and newspaper.
Water and newspaper. Wasn't it ammonia?
No. The policy act water and newspaper.
Wow, I swear I heard one with the Hubbard that mentioned ammonia.
You're allowed to clean with ammonia because ammonia doesn't have a lasting fragrance, but you're not allowed to clean with any fragrances.
So it's probably that I heard.
Like, maybe I've got it wrong, but like, that wouldn't be the first time. But I believed all this. I was still trying to apply Scientology actions into my life, and mate, that didn't get me anywhere. That got me fired from jobs. That got me kicked out. That got me PTS.
Like what? Like the whole, like, what Scientology actions? Like, because outside the Sea Org, there isn't this bulldog attitude of like arguing with people and trying to slam your reality into them. Not as much. I mean, it's there a little bit.
As an ex-staff member, you don't know that. Like, as an ex-staff member, you don't realize there's a problem with being a bulldog. As an ex-staff member, you think that you have to be the biggest dog on the park. Like, you have to, and then you have all these little management techniques. You manage by statistics, or you get 3 price quotes if you're a purchaser, or you promote, or when you go into emergency, you do these actions, or to come out of non-E in a group, you have to send around an email saying, hey guys, I'm now working for you as your communications manager. Like, hi, look at me. What do you want from me to do? Well, no, you're hired because you're a professional and you should actually be a professional. Like, the comm cycle is amazing how the comm cycle sometimes doesn't fit, because the biggest, like, no matter what, there's a way to break the comm cycle, and that's just to say no, right? Have you ever tried to buy something and someone just turned around and goes no? It's like, you can't, right? You're still being in the cycle. They're responding to you, but you can't break that. So I was a strong believer. I believed everything. I was still a zealot in some cases, but then when I started to look at who L. Ron Hubbard was and how there was concerns around his mental health, and how David Miscavige is just an extension of what L. Ron Hubbard started. It's sort of like you look at that and you go, well, hang on a second, what doesn't work in Scientology? And as soon as I ask those questions, it's sort of like, well, it doesn't help if, like, money doesn't grow on trees and you can just go out and reg someone for a whole bunch of money and everything's good. You have to go and earn it, right? You have to work really hard to earn it. You just can't walk up to a random public and say, hey, I'm going to sell you a dream. Here, you want to buy it? You need to make money. You need to support yourselves. It's so like all those things become the negative points, and where Scientology doesn't work, it doesn't always solve every problem. And I started to question those. And as soon as I found more and more of those points where it didn't help me, like, I started to realize that maybe it wasn't what I wanted, and what I wasn't prepared to take that belief any further. So I stopped using Scientology. I stopped applying it in the way that I did, and I started to recover, right? Like, I started to get better jobs. I started to create for myself. I've started a family. It's since dropping Scientology that all these things have happened.
So in the first few years you left the Sea Org, did you have this big blow of charge and this big coming out, toneness and improvement, or did this happen after 7 years?
After 7 years is when I had the big blow.
Wow, so you really, for the first 7 years after the Sea Org, you really were still in the whole...
Early in the conversation, but I was so PTSD. It was
but what's really interesting though is because when I left the church, I left the beliefs of the church and actually attending the church at the same time. So yours is interesting because it wasn't soaking up your time for those first 7 years. So I would have thought you would have gotten, heaps of wins from that.
No, mate, got less.
Oh, wow.
For me personally, it's like, because I didn't drop Scientology when I left, I was still believing. I believed that I was the problem. I believed I was the reason why I couldn't be in Scientology. I believed I still had certain things. It's so like, it was unconscious, but I still believed certain tenets of when I left.
But you had all this free time though, to now work on yourself and all that sort of stuff.
I did, and I went to countries, and I traveled, and I worked, and I had new experiences, and I could start 2-day relationships without being married.
So you expanded and stuff. You expanded. Sorry? You expanded as a being, but it was just after you really gave up the beliefs and all that, then you really got the case gain.
That was the case gain, mate, and it's a level of case gain.
Did you feel like weight lifting off your shoulders?
Look, again. In some respects, yeah. It's in other respects, it was just when you've a PC's come out of session and they're just laughing. They're ecstatic. There's nothing else, and they're just glowing, and everything that you do or say is just amusing, and it's the funniest thing in the planet.
Yep.
That was me when I started to come out of it. I went uptone. I accelerated uptone. I was happy to be around other people. I was happy to accept my situation in life. I was happy to take new challenges on, and I was happy to restart things again. One of the biggest concerns people have is and a SEAL member is one of the biggest people who can show you this is. A Sea Org member, when they leave the Sea Org, has to restart their life. If you realize what that means and how easy it can be, you can do it every single time. When I came back to Australia, I moved back to Sydney. I went overseas for several years and came back and found a job in Melbourne. I then started living in Melbourne. It's sort of like most people can't travel from their home city anymore. It's sort of like, but you realize how easy it is, and that's only because of my acceptance of where I was. But But yeah, first 7 years, I didn't want anything to. I was still believing in L. Ron Hubbard and the church, and I was under the belief that the church, the Sea Org, was not what I was cut out for, and I was the reason why.
All right. Yeah, the beliefs are that strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can. Yeah. I mean, I had a bit more of a stubbornness in that when I was dealing with the church. I sort of knew I was right in the disagreements I had with HCO, and I knew I could solve these problems, and I knew that I just needed to research the church more and find out why it's doing strange things and stuff.
That's not allowed when you're on staff as a SEAL member. You're not allowed. Like as I said, there was 5 people who were allowed access to the internet, and I was one of them.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I went and started researching websites in regards to Scientology, I would have every single session that I had online, every time my computer would log every single web page that I went to, and if it was questioned what I was doing, I would be pulled in for a meter check.
Mm. Yeah, you can't get out when you're in it.
And that was the thing. So like I had the access, but I couldn't use it. So like, and that was what it was. But like, I've subsequently learned some of the tricks that people have pulled on. That people pulled on me was like, and yeah, it's in my mind, the Church of Scientology is a cult.
Yeah,
and an amazingly business orientated, only helping the guy up type cult. And if that was L. Ron Hubbard, it still is. It's still helping him. And if it's David Miscavige, it's only helping him.
All right. Yeah, I definitely believe the church is a cult. Anyway, so I think that's all I want to ask you. Is there anything you want to say or ask before I end this interview?
Look, I guess let's just quickly, like, if I was to repeat my time, I would still have gone into the church. I don't have a problem in the experiences that I've had. If I could tell anyone who's thinking about leaving the church, I would tell them that it's up to them how their life story comes about. And as they say, life is in the cracks. So you can be tone 40 and you can be pushing everything through, but that's not really life, is it? It's everything that happens in the middle. It's the stories that you don't hear about. That's what life is. And that's, if I could tell anyone who's thinking about leaving, it would be life is in the cracks. Like, go and make some.
All right. Yeah, and this story you're saying has got a good ending, really. I mean, overall, in the end, you come out on top.
And that's one of the, and obviously there's going to be, there's everything is still to happen. But look, I've given it up for now. And the worst thing I can say that's happened to me during that time is that I had to admit I was a Scientologist. No one cares. That's the biggest thing is, no one cares that I was involved in the church. No one holds that against me. Can I do the job that I'm currently doing? Yes. Then good. Do your job. Get on with your life. Go home and have your own experiences.
Yeah, sometimes when you get... It's easy to think that, people, I don't know, worry about certain things, or they're thinking about you, and this sort of stuff. And then the truth is sometimes it's just hey, people just don't give a shit. Especially maybe, I don't know, a new haircut or just something or this or that about your past. And when it comes down to it, it's just people don't care. And even if they did care for that moment, they'll just forget in a week's time.
And I've told people now, I'm an ex-Scientologist and I'm an ex-staff member, and they go, oh, wow, can we ask about this and this and this and this and this? And I go, yeah. And, I'm a manager of people now, and it's so, the next day I'm walking in, they're not going oh, my God, he's a Scientologist. It's more get back to work. I want you to get your productivity under control because I'm going to get mine under control. Let's get back to the job. And it's so, not once do they actually question you ever again. It's so, it's just out of their world. And it's all okay, so... The hang up with being a Scientologist is mine. Okay, that's funny if you think about it.
Yeah. I think that's how introversion works when a person's introverted. When it comes to all these different things in their life, they're thinking, oh, this person's thinking about this, and they're sort of in their own mind, and they're just creating it all, and they're worried about what everyone thinks and stuff, and it's just no, it's all in your head. I mean, you're People don't really care about you. Like, unless you're like the Queen or something, like really, like, you're not that important. You know what I mean? Like, I know it sounds a bit negative, but
And that's one of the biggest things. It's like you tell a Scientologist and tell an FSO, you tell a staff member, it's like, will the job continue if you're not there? The answer is yes. Like, they're still going to be turning over the machine. It's like, you don't have to kill yourself for something that they're just going to put the next Joe Blow into the seat to do. And it's like, I don't understand where you're getting this mentality.
And there also might be a better way to help Scientology if you actually believe it and you like it. There might be a better way. Like, that's part of the reason why I cognited on. I looked at the situation and I was like, this church is not succeeding. It's not clearing the planet. And the best way, I don't even really care about reforming. I feel it's like just start something new. You know what I mean? Because reforming is a lot of effort. It's like building a house and then having to do all these changes to the house. It's like, that's a lot. Why don't you just build a new house somewhere else? It's easy to build a new house.
Oh, yeah, but mate, when you've got all your gold underneath the house, you don't really want to get rid of the property, do you?
Yeah, I know what you mean. But in order to correct the Church of Scientology, it's a massive monstrosity. Imagine it as a building. It's a massive monstrosity building, and it's not just a matter of renovating it and modifying it and going, yeah, now Scientology is good. It's like, but there's so much that needs to get done.
You can't, and this is probably something for yourself as well. It's like, you can't say that because Scientology is only connected through Source. Source is only L. Ron Hubbard. The guy's dead. He ain't fucking coming back, right?
Yeah, so, exactly. That's why it's like a building that actually has regulations. You cannot renovate it. Like you can't change it. You know what I mean?
And you've got to live in that house, and it's like got no modern cons. Like look at the mimeograph policy letters. Like, it actually says you're not allowed to use a photocopier. Like, you have to use a mimeograph. Like, that was written in the 50s when that was true, right? Now you can plug in a USB stick and print off. But every single org that is using a photocopier for their mimeo is actually breaking policy. So if it's okay to break that policy, what other policies are you going to break?
I know. It's really interesting, and like with the CDs for the lectures and stuff. Like, I mean, they'll just be sitting there for years, and society has just totally moved on from CDs.
You've heard the reason why the CDs exist, right? You've heard that interview, right?
The what?
I found it completely synonymous with. I found it completely indicative of Scientology. You heard why the CDs exist, right? I think it was a Jeffrey Augustine and I can't remember. Mark Head.
Yeah, Mark Headley, yeah.
He said that the reason that the CDs exist and the reason that they haven't changed the media type is because they got told to produce. Like, they were told that was their stat. CD creations was the stat that they were being managed on. And they created so many that they can't actually write it off anymore because there's stock written straight off the bottom line.
Yeah.
So they've got to keep selling them.
Yeah, I know. And like the Melbourne org has like $2 million worth of materials just in their shelves and in their storage rooms. They're selling 1 e-meter a month and 1 pack of lectures a month, and they've just got all this stock, and it's just like, it's going to take forever.
That's the biggest kicker. They've actually already paid for it and they can't sell it. Yet, if you were a business and you had that, you'd go, you know what? Get it to someone, 50% discount, you know what, just get it sold, right?
And you can't really do that.
That's against policy.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It's okay to accept some of the policies, just not all of them.
Anyway, we should end this. Yeah. All right. Yeah. But it's got a good ending, no, because we've done a bit of complaining in this interview, though, but in the end it's come out pretty good. Like, as in, like, you and everything, your experience.
Like, I've been able to start my family in Melbourne. I've got my life back back together, and I'm starting to question and starting to experience the joys again. Scientology was definitely a function that I was a part of, and look, I appreciated my time inside the church, but I also realized that if it had paid me probably correctly and actually had a policy that was actually or a pathway that made sense, like, it would be like the military, mate. It would be a career choice and something you could do. But if you could only exit it and stay connected, you would, right? But that's not what they promote.
Yeah. Well, that's it for today's show. It's time for you to climb back out of this interesting Scientology rabbit hole. I've been your host, Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy, and I've been chatting with Nathan Lord. You've been listening to the Indie Scientology podcast. So remember, what you thought was impossible is possible.